Next on the Wisconsin Gardener, how to bring beauty to your winter garden. Protect your plants from winter damage. And create a wreath to attract winter birds. Major funding for the production of the Wisconsin Gardener has been provided by Jung Seed and Nursery Company, with garden centers in Randolph, Stevens Point, Madison, and Sun Prairie. Additional funding has been provided by Mr. Shrub Landscapes of Watertown.
Winter in Wisconsin. For many of us gardeners, it's the quietest season of the year, a time to plan and dream of spring. Welcome to the Wisconsin Gardener. I'm Shelley Ryan, master gardener and gardening enthusiast. Winter can be a frustrating time for gardeners. The days are short, the weather is cold, and the view outside our window is often bleak and white. But it doesn't have to be that way. We've got some projects for you on the Wisconsin Gardener that will make your yard and your home bloom, even on the darkest of winter days. Our first visit to the UW-Madison Arboretum for a look at some trees and shrubs that will make your winter landscape more interesting. I'm with Extension horticulturist Dr. Astrid Nieuwenhuis, and we're here at the Arboretum to look at some trees and shrubs that can make your winter yard and garden more interesting. Astrid, when I think winter interest, I think color. Color is important, isn't it?
Color is important in a winter landscape, and there's lots of ways we can get color, like the red bark on this red osier dogwood.
Or fruits, such as these on the Donald Wyman crabapple. These hang on the tree all winter. But most people, when they think winter color, winter interest, they think evergreens. What about the juniper behind us?
This juniper is a great example of winter color. It'll stay green all year long, even in the winter. But color isn't the only thing in a winter garden. There's shape, there's form, there's texture. I want to look at landscape plants in a new way, looking at those other aspects of beauty. This juniper is a great example of shape and form. Look at how the branches just reach up towards the sky. Isn't that pretty?
It has a warm, open feel to it. But when you say texture, I also think of coming in close and touching.
Right, I do too. Texture is, to me, it's kind of like describing the plant by feel. Would you describe it as twiggy, as coarse, as fine?
And then the berries add smooth in there as well.
Yeah. Or it's maybe spiny or prickly.
Or sharp occasionally, yes.
So it's the needles and the berries that add texture to this.
Well, now this is a fairly large one. What about for a smaller yard? Is there a juniper I can pick?
Oh, there's lots of junipers. They come in all different sizes. They come in waist-high, low, creeping ones.
The ground-hugging ones, yeah.
Nice for a rock garden.
Or it's just a nice small yard. Well, in Wisconsin, a lot of trees lose their leaves in the winter. How would a bare tree have winter interest?
Oh, I think they're gorgeous.
What about this cork tree?
To me, walking outside in the winter, I feel like I'm stepping out into a line drawing or a charcoal painting. And the branching habit of this cork tree exemplifies that. Look at how the branches outline the sky as if each branch is a brush stroke.
It's really beautiful. But I can see why it's called a cork tree, too. Look at the texture. It invites you to walk up close and touch it. Look at the ridges on the side of that.
Yeah, look at that.
Really beautiful.
Makes you just want to go up and feel it.
Yes.
Isn't that nice?
It is a corky feel to it, too. And it does have a color, actually. It has a very soft gray that would be beautiful in a winter garden. Now, this tree and the juniper are fairly open and casual. What about something for a more formal garden?
Oh, there's lots of plants we could choose from.
Let's go look. This is a cotoneaster. It has beautiful bright red berries that add a nice touch of color to a winter garden. But that's not the only reason to plant this, is it?
Right, Shelley, there's lots of reasons to choose this plant. It has a fountain-like growth habit. It has parallel branching in a real formal pattern. Look at the way those branches are all lined up next to each other.
It looks very geometric. And it has leaves also.
Yeah,
these stay on a while?
They stay on longer than most leaves do in the season. They don't stay on all winter, but they'll stay on later. Look at how shiny and glossy they are. They're really pretty.
So they add a nice touch of color and texture again to this. Well, the next one we're going to look at keeps its leaves all winter. It's an evergreen, but not with needles like we commonly think.
Yeah, this is a broadleaf evergreen. It's called boxwood, and it will keep its leaves all through the winter.
Now, I've seen somewhere later in the winter they do turn kind of a bronze purple as they...
Right. It won't be as bright as this.
Now, will it stay this size?
Eventually, it'll grow up to be about 5 feet tall, but you could prune it to any size, even any shape that you want.
So this would be perfect for a more formal garden where you really want to control the shape and size of it. Now, this isn't a native. What about a native tree, something like the Juneberry?
Oh, this is a gorgeous example of winter interest. When I look at a tree like this, I see a sculpture. I see a Henry Moore sculpture. Look at the way the branches, the trunks are all together there at the base, and then they're narrow, and then they open up to like a vase shaped. It's just a gorgeous tree.
Well, and I like the way the light plays on the bark, too. It really gives it almost a warm glow.
Yeah, it makes you just want to go up and touch it.
Yes.
The bark is so smooth, and it's so rippled. Look at this. It's just so gorgeous.
It almost looks like it's human, like muscles or something.
Right.
Now this is a tree with year-round interest, too. It has great fall color and edible fruit that tastes like blueberries in the spring.
That's right.
But I think my favorite reason is the texture, the touch. It almost looks like skin up there. This is a nice tree. I have a couple more I'd like to look at, and the next one's my favorite. Want to take a look?
Let's go.
This is yellow birch. It's another Wisconsin native. I think you can see why it's one of my favorites. Look at the color of this birch, the bronze colors, and the silver bark, too. It's just
Oh,
just
it's
one of my
gorgeous,
favorites.
Shelley. Another thing about the yellow birch is that it's resistant to the bronze birch borer, which attacks paper birch.
Well, it's quite a deadly problem in Wisconsin, so a resistant variety like this would be an excellent choice.
Right.
It's a little hard to come by in Wisconsin, but I do know it's for sale, and I think it's worth shopping around for.
Oh, I definitely think it's worth getting.
Well, you know, one of the other things I like about it is that the branches, the twigs, taste like wintergreen. In fact, they're used to flavor wintergreen oil.
Something I like about the branches is that they catch snow, or like in this case, they catch pine needles. That's texture.
Oh, that's beautiful. They just hang there almost like little ornaments.
Yeah, look at that.
Now, you know, it's funny. We think of pine trees for winter interest, but we don't think of pine needles. And yet, if you look at the ground, that's where the winter interest is here.
Yeah, what's happening here, I mean, talk about looking at landscape in a new way, is that the needles, at least in my mind, are acting as individual brush strokes, as if they're in a line drawing. Picture this on a background of white snow with each individual needle.
Beautiful.
Like a brush stroke.
So this is one tree also we wouldn't have to clean up under in the fall.
Oh, I wouldn't.
Well, it also has the beautiful green color. That's just so nice.
And it's so soft. It just invites touch again.
So it's a different kind of texture. I hear something else, too. I hear the wind through the branches, so it has sound interest.
Right.
You know, evergreens aren't truly evergreens. The needles that we see falling are 3 years old. So that's what we're seeing carpeting the ground below us. Well, could you sum up? What should we look for when we're looking for trees and shrubs to purchase?
I'd look for form, shape, the overall form of the tree or shrub. I'd look for texture, both visual texture and up close. You know, when you feel the tree, is it twiggy, coarse, fine?
So touching and seeing.
Right.
Okay.
I'd look for color, and I'd look for sound.
That's great. Thank you, Esther.
You're welcome, Shelley.
We've given you some ideas to make your winter landscape more interesting. Now we're going to show you how to protect that winter landscape from hungry critters. I'm with Extension Wildlife Ecologist Scott Craven. And Scott, I learned the hard way about protecting your plants. The first year I had a yard, I planted a whole bunch of trees, came out in the spring, and everything I owned was 2 inches tall. So it is important to plan ahead.
It's very important to plan in late fall or early winter to plan to prevent mammal damage over winter.
What are the problem animals in Wisconsin?
The big three are probably white-tailed deer, cottontail rabbits, and meadow mice or meadow voles in that order.
Are there any general practices we should do to help prevent problems?
In general, if people just keep a clean site, if you keep tall grass down around your plantings, no piles of prunings or mulch or wood piles or things like that, to the extent that you can minimize the habitat for the small animals like the mice and the rabbits, you can go a long way towards solving some of those problems.
Okay, and is there some place where people can get more information on this?
Yes, absolutely. There are very thorough extension publications on both deer and rabbits, and another one on meadow voles that will provide detailed information on trapping and toxicants, repellents, where they're appropriate.
We're going to talk about physical protection today.
Right.
What's the first step?
Well, the first step is identifying the culprit.
Knowing the enemy.
If you don't know who the pest is by looking at the damage, you just can't apply the right control technique. For example, if you had an apple twig that looked something like this with a fairly messy, what looks like a messy, shreddy cut, little bit of bark left behind, this is done by deer. Deer have no upper incisors, so they make a rather messy cut. Rabbits and rodents, on the other hand, make a very sharp angle, about a 45-degree angle, very clean cut. Looks like it was done with pruning shears.
Yes.
And on this raspberry cane, that's very visible. Mice also do most of their damage right at ground zero, right at the base of the tree. In this case, a stump from a Scotch pine. You can see that they've completely taken all the bark off with their sharp little teeth. Once the tree is girdled, it's doomed, and rabbits can do the same thing.
Okay, well, looking at deer first, the tallest, what do we do to physically protect against them?
Fencing is just about the only alternative. The good news is that for a small plot in a backyard or a couple of fruit trees, a fairly low fence, even just snow fence material, will sometimes work.
So about 4 feet tall then?
About 4 feet tall. The larger the plot, you have to get up to the so-called 8-foot deer-proof fence, and that's really the only alternative, other than some configurations of electric fencing that can also be very effective.
All right, well, what about these two critters?
In terms of protecting them, there are some things we can look at over here.
Okay.
If we visualize this as being a newly planted apple tree, for example, to protect against both rabbits and meadow mice over winter, at the time of planting, you could have used a plastic tree collar like this, which just stays right on the tree for a couple of years, and those are very effective. After the fact, a hardware cloth of various mesh sizes and widths. You want to make sure as you make a hardware cloth cylinder to protect the tree that it's away from the trunk so they can't chew through it, and that it's well staked down, and that you anticipate maximum snow depth.
Well, I had a question about that. Sometimes I don't get out there on time. Can I pull the snow away and still protect?
No problem. As long as the damage hasn't started, or even if it has, it's better to be late than not do it at all, because again, by spring, the tree can be wiped out. Even various types of commercial tree wrap that are put on for other purposes will at least help minimize the problem.
Okay, now for something that's multi-stemmed, we're going to have to use the fencing or the caging.
Right. Depends on the size of the shrub you're dealing with. In some cases, more hardware cloth, but this stuff is relatively expensive. Regular chicken wire or rabbit guard fencing material that's 18 or 24 inches high could be used to make a cage around a larger shrub.
At what size can we stop worrying about them getting eaten?
By the time most plant materials get to be what we might say is mature, 2 or 3 inches in diameter in the case of apples, and the barks become rather thick and plate-like, they tend to leave them alone.
All right, is there anything else we should do?
Well, a lot of people favor the removal of the offending animal, and a good live trap like this one, baited and placed appropriately. You can catch lots of rabbits during the winter months when food's in short supply, and just relocate them and problem is solved.
Okay, great. Thank you, Scott.
Sure.
There are some animals that won't cause harm. Our next project, how to attract them to your winter garden. Well, this segment is strictly for the birds. While there's many animals you may not want in your backyard, birds are always welcome visitors in a winter landscape. With me is professional gardener Tibby Light, and Tibby's going to show us some of the ornaments she's made for the birds. Tibby, what have we got here?
Well, hi, Shelley. What we've got here is a collection of materials that we've gathered from the neighboring yards and gardens in the area. And we're starting with a sunflower seed head. A lot of creatures like those. And we took a wire, poked it through it, and used it to hang it.
So it just hangs, all right.
Yeah. And then what we did was we found some Washington hawthorn berries, which is from the hawthorn trees, which are grown ornamentally, and you can find them in people's yards all over.
Well, and the berries stay on the trees all winter long, too, so they're really pretty just on the trees.
Yeah. And the birds don't care if they're on the tree or on your decorations.
Oh, that's great.
They enjoy it.
Well, now this is sorghum, and this is what they used to make sorghum molasses out of. I grew it in my backyard just to experiment with this last year, and you plant the seed about the same time you plant corn, and up come these really pretty seed heads, and the birds seem to just love it. Plus, they're really nice to look at.
That's great, Shelley.
Ah, now here we have a stick on a chain.
Right. This is a piece of wood that we got, and we put a chain on the top to hang it from. And we drilled holes into it, and into the holes we put suet, which we lightly warmed, and then you can squish it in. And into that suet, you can put dried fruit or nuts or seeds or any little goodie that you know a bird would really enjoy to eat.
Well, the dried fruit I know is a favorite in my yard.
Yeah.
Well, and it looks like then you've added some perches here, but then you've also got a natural perch for the birds.
Isn't that lovely?
That's
yeah,
nice.
that is right there.
And now this I recognize, this is highbush cranberry. It's a native Wisconsin shrub. In fact, I have it growing in my backyard. The cardinals seem particularly attracted to that. And you've got some other berries, it looks like rose hips and some hawthorn again.
Right.
Now, what's this here?
Well, that's a little thing we cooked up, Shelley. We call them nut cups. This is the top of an acorn from a pin oak tree. The acorn's fallen off, and now we have this empty acorn cap, which is just perfect for a little serving of a little goodie for a bird.
So bird hors d'oeuvres.
Bird hors d'oeuvres, right.
All right. Oh, and you've put in dried cherries again and some suet.
Suet and nuts. You could put in peanut butters or little seeds, whatever you notice they really like to eat.
And then you'd attach them to another log like this.
Right.
Now this one
Right.
we wouldn't have to drill a hole because we could just put the suet right in the natural cavities.
Yeah. It's fun to look for things that have natural holes like that.
So just add a chain, a few more decorations, and we're ready to hang this one.
Right, yeah.
Okay. Well, let's look at the wreath you made too.
Well, this is a wreath we made, Shelley, from grape twigs, and you can either make it yourself or buy them from the garden centers already made. Then onto this, what we did is we put, this is crabapple vines, and I cut twigs from the crabapple tree.
And just wired them on. looks like.
Yeah, laced them through and wired them down.
Well, now the cedar waxwings seem to really like a lot of the crab apples.
Yeah, they enjoy eating these quite a bit.
Well, now I recognize this. This is bittersweet. In my yard, it seems to attract bluebirds, but much later in the winter.
Wow, you're so lucky to have them. Yeah, it's nice to put this out later on when they come back. It'll give them a nice treat to start in on.
February, March, maybe, to hang this kind of wreath.
Yeah.
Well, now here I see the nut cups again. And then this is a sunflower head. Now, the ones in my yard seem to attract goldfinches. They just go crazy over these little sunflowers.
Well, that's such a nice way to look at it, because you look out your window, you see they really like to eat something, then you know that that's something you can either put on your wreath or grow in your garden to feed them further.
You can actually plan to plant it and then use it for decorations as well.
Right.
Okay, what's this?
These are bergamot seed heads, or bee balm, and these, I think it's the juncos, right?
Yes, in my yard, yeah. I have them planted outside my window, and I don't deadhead them, and the birds sit out there all winter. And now this is purple coneflower. I know the finches are really fans of this one, too.
Right.
Well, now, can you show us how you wire something like this wreath?
What you do, Shelley, is you take your material and you literally just wedge it in there, and you'll find it
here's a
kind
wire.
of sticks. And I take a piece of wire and I just tack it around that piece and tie it down tightly so that the winter winds and the little scrambling of the animals don't break it off for you.
Now, that's florist wire?
Florist wire,
So it
right.
doesn't show up too much.
Yeah, you can get that at most craft shops.
Okay. Well, this looks like it was kind of fun to make.
It was a lot of fun to make on a cold winter day, Shelley.
Well, thank you, Tibby.
Thank you.
This would make a great gift for bird lovers and for the birds in your backyard. Beautiful, isn't it? A mature stand of ornamental grasses like these will provide color and interest all winter long. I'm at Allen Centennial Gardens with John Mather, greenhouse manager for the UW-Madison Department of Horticulture. And John, grasses like these are kind of a new old passion, aren't they?
That's exactly right, Shelley. I think most people would, when they think of grasses, would think of lawns. But
Yes.
actually, grasses have been around since the dawn of civilization, providing us with food and fiber. And ornamental grasses reached the height of their popularity in Victorian times and have been making a comeback in this country in the last 20 to 30 years.
Well, not only are they pretty to look at, they really provide a nice screen. We're on a busy street corner. I can hear the traffic, but I can't see it. How long did it take to get them this tall?
This planting's about 3 years old.
So this is a good choice for a quick screen.
Oh, definitely. These plants here will reach their mature height in about 2 years. And the porcupine grass that we're looking at gets about 6 to 8 feet tall. We normally start these from plants, and the clumps just keep getting bigger over time.
So do we have to worry about lots of seedlings from all these seed heads?
No, For the most part, these plants are sterile, so you won't get the little plants growing up all over the place.
Okay, well, and look at the leaves. The stripes on that are just beautiful.
They're pretty.
They'll stay all winter long. I assume they just kind of fade out?
That's exactly right.
Okay.
Why don't we go look at some other grasses?
Okay.
All right.
This has got to be the tallest one in the garden, John. This is incredible.
Isn't it amazing? This is Ravenna grass, and it's 12 to 15 feet tall.
At least.
And makes a beautiful vertical accent in a garden. It's a wonderful specimen plant, and 2 or 3 of them will fill in an area just wonderfully. As with most of the grasses that we're talking about today, too, they're all native to moist areas, and so they're pretty moisture tolerant. This one in particular, though, is much more tolerant of moisture and has actually been used along stream banks and in roadside ditches.
So it will actually fill in a problem area for us.
Exactly. In fact, it will fill in the area. Unlike the other grasses we're talking about today, the seeds of this grass will sprout and little plants will grow up and the area will get filled in.
So the clumps will get bigger and then we'll have little babies coming along too.
That's exactly right.
Okay, what about the one behind you? I have been wanting to touch this. Look at the way the seed heads just glow. This is beautiful.
It's lovely. It's, interestingly enough, autumn light.
Good name
Another
for it.
miscanthus. And as you can see, it's another tall one, 6 to 8 feet tall. And these seed heads come out in late September and early October. The fall colors are usually yellow, and when light strikes this, it just almost glows.
So it'd be a real nice one to plant like on a hillside or in front of the setting sun.
Exactly. In fact, I think grasses are shown off to their best, particularly for winter interest, when they're reflected in water or on a hill where we can see the movement
Watching waving
against
in the wind.
the sky. Yeah.
Well, now these grasses are all warm season grasses. That means they don't even start growing till the temperatures reach about 70.
Right. The grasses we're talking about today are warm season grasses, and they come up in late spring.
Now this stays here all winter?
Actually, yes, you definitely want to keep this here all winter long. But in the spring, when you're just hankering to get out in the garden in late February, early March, you get in here and you cut out all of the old foliage.
Cut it back to the ground?
Cut it back to about an inch above the ground, and this will give the new shoots an opportunity to grow up.
Okay.
At the same time, when we've cut these down, there are all these spaces around the clumps that we've planted in the fall with spring flowering bulbs.
Oh, perfect. So then you've got the bulbs coming up to hide the empty clumps where the grass was.
Exactly, and then in their turn, the grasses come up and hide the old ugly foliage as the tulips or daffodils die out.
So a great example of companion planting.
Exactly.
All right, what about this grass? It's a little shorter. It looks like it might be a little bit more appropriate for a smaller yard.
Yeah, the grasses we've been talking about here before are pretty big. This is another miscanthus. It's called flame grass, and it, as you can see, it gets 4 or 5 feet tall. We still get a little bit of a hint as to why it's called flame grass. There's a little purple tint here, but in the fall, even actually in early September, this will get a bright orange color, reddish orange, and when the light strikes this, it's actually ablaze.
Well, this is still beautiful right now.
Isn't it beautiful?
Now, are these hardy even up in northern Wisconsin?
Well, as we mentioned earlier, grasses have been coming back into this country in the last 20 to 30 years, and we don't have a lot of experience with their hardiness, but places like the Minnesota Landscape Arboretum have grown these for a number of years, and as long as we site these in situations where there's good drainage, we're going to get them through the winter.
Well, and I've also been advised to mulch them the first couple of years with sawdust or something.
It's an excellent idea. Cut them back in the fall the first couple of years, put a little mulch over them, and they'll make it through the winter a little better. Actually, after that, they almost mulch themselves.
They sure do. What about diseases and pests?
These are the ultimate low-maintenance plant.
Good.
Disease-free, pest-free, very little need to fertilize them, and best of all, when these plants fill in, they crowd out the weeds.
Not my favorite chore. That's perfect. Thanks, John. And remember, grasses like these can provide winter interest in 2 ways: outdoors in your garden, or bring a few inside for a dried arrangement. Trees and shrubs that add color, form, even texture. Ornamental grasses that wave in the wind and add beauty to a winter yard. And plants that attract birds. I hope we've given you some ideas to make your winter garden more interesting and enjoyable. Remember that your county extension agent has more information and bulletins on the topics we've covered today. Thanks for joining me on the Wisconsin Gardener.
Major funding for the production of the Wisconsin Gardener has been provided by Jung Seed and Nursery Company, with garden centers in Randolph, Stevens Point, Madison, and Sun Prairie. Additional funding has been provided by Mr. Shrub Landscapes of Watertown.